But we clearly underfund our transportation. I think this budget, it's $250 billion if you look at the total federal, and state funds. It's about $2 billion for transportation. And we need much more than that to keep our roads, number one, repair our roads and then build new capacity. So I have been working very hard with Senator Bell. Senator Bell is fantastic. I love working with Jim. He's a true champion for transportation, and if it were up to he and I, we'd have a deal already cut, and it'd be great for the state of California. But I want more than just money, right? So we're talking, I think the current proposal is about $6 billion, which goes, unlimited. There's no sunset, so $6 billion in perpetuity. And for some of my friends in the majority party, that's maybe the easier vote because we have the money. But I want more than that. I want to make sure that if we pass that on to the taxpayers, because it is a tax. Now, I like to call it a user fee to kind of make people not so uncomfortable, but it's really a gas tax. I want to make sure that we're actually building the projects, because if we're not, then what's the point? If we start collecting $6 billion a year, and it sits in a fund and we don't do anything with it for a few years, then what was the point? We should have just not collected it. So I believe that anything we do with transportation, if we're going to have additional funding, there needs to be reforms as well. And so some of the things I've been fighting for, I'm a big believer in mass transit. I think we should have a lot more mass transit, especially in my area. So the first thing I want is to build ACE train. It currently stops in Lathrop. I don't know if you know the Central Valley as much, but it stops in Lathrop. I want to extend that down to Merced. It's about $550 million. It'd be just tremendous for my area. I also want some other fixes to the process so that we can actually build the projects without duplicating a lot of efforts, and most notably with CEQA and NEPA and how those two come together. But it seems like we've got a deal on a lot of the larger items. Where we're stuck is on the CEQA reforms that I want. Now, when I was first elected to the legislature, I didn't know anything, literally, about the Capitol. I was a mayor. It was a small town. But one thing I said is, if I get elected, I'm gonna work hard to make things better for my constituents. So here I am, I'm thrust into, I'm elected to the state senate, I did not go to the assembly, and all of a sudden we have this big budget shortfall, and we're talking with the governor about, a big tax program. And I was one of that group that was negotiating. It went horribly poorly, unfortunately, but it was a good experience for me to get involved, because I think if we're here, as a Republican, it's the easiest thing I can do is vote no on everything, and there'll be parades for me. I'll be just celebrated in my district. Now, my district won't get a single thing, and I don't think the state will move forward, but I'll be celebrated. So I refuse to do that. So I started getting involved in the transportation measure, largely, look, I'm an engineer, so I believe in transportation, but because I think we can do some things to make things better. So during that initial budget talk with the governor, I was naive. I thought, I want to fix CEQA once and for all, and I will never do that again, because there are such strong forces to keep CEQA exactly like it is. It's just, I got 2.5 years left. I'm just not going to fight that battle. However, I will fight the battle for transportation funding, because again, we're raising the money for it, but also we've got to build these roads. And so what I'm trying to do is have some very narrow CEQA fixes only for transportation.
I think when you run for political office, you should run because you care about people. People matter. You should care about the people that you serve, whether it be in your district or now you get elected by district and you have responsibility that's statewide. You should care about the people that you serve. I'm a conservative. I call myself a governing conservative, because I think that just having conservative principles, once you get into office, you should also be able to execute on those principles. It's not enough just to say no. There should be a question of yes. How do we get to yes? How do we make sure that we've got a government that works? And if you look at California and where we're at today, I think it's fair to say that it's broken. California government doesn't work. If you look at if you're looking at our outcomes when it comes to education, if you look at the major issues of today, the fact that our roads are falling apart, the fact that we have not built a water infrastructure for the current population that we have today, and then we've got a huge housing crisis in California. And then the one measurement that I use often is that California, and this is hard to believe, but it's absolutely true. California has the highest poverty rate in the nation. So let me say that again. California, I didn't say Louisiana, I didn't say Alabama, I didn't say Idaho. California has the highest poverty rate in the nation. Now that's the supplemental poverty measure. It's not the official poverty measure. The official poverty measure is about even with the rest of the country. But when you use the supplemental poverty measure, when you factor in for the cost of living, housing costs, energy costs, we have the highest poverty rate in the nation. If you use that as our benchmark, we're not doing so well in this state. And when I think of California and its vast beauty, you know, I live in the desert, in the Mojave Desert there in San Bernardino County, and I find it to be just gorgeous, right next to Joshua National Park. My district includes, you know, Palm Springs, La Quinta, Indian Wells. There's some great golf that's there, some beautiful mountains, the Palm Springs Aerial Tramway that's there. But you think of the Central Valley, and you think of the cities that we have here in California, and you think of wine country, and you think of our national parks with Yosemite and Redwood National Park. So we have amazing, I mean, California is an amazing state. Our weather is second to none. And yet when you start to look at these measurements, our standard of living is not as high as it is in the rest of the country. And you think, how can that be? And I believe it's because we failed here in this building just a few blocks away and making sure that we're providing putting the policies in place to make sure that we've got a good standard of living in California. You know, when I was campaigning, I would tell this story, and I stopped telling this story because, you know, at some point it gets old, but I read an article a few weeks ago that said, it was the IRS data, you know, even though unemployment now has dropped, we're in year 7 of an economic recovery, you know, people are still leaving California to move to other places. This article that I read a few weeks ago used the IRS data that said there's 37,000 Californians that left in 2015 to move to Texas. And while it's true that some Texans moved to California, there's only 20,000 Texans that left Texas to move to California. It's 2 to 1. Pull it up on your phone, go to uhaul.com, and you pick any city in California, and you look at how much it costs to rent a 20-foot U-Haul truck, which is what you would need to be able to load up a 2 or 3 bedroom house. And you look at how much it costs to rent one in California. I just looked it up the other day. In virtually every city, it's about $2,000. From Riverside, California to Austin, Texas, $2,000. To rent a U-Haul truck from Austin, Texas, to come back to California, it's $1,000. Why? Because of supply and demand. Right? There's 2 people leaving California for every one. And I think with all of our beautiful natural resources, why is that is unacceptable? So let me tell you the story. And this was a few years ago now, but I had showed up to a going away party for a good friend of mine. His name is Brett. And Brett had grown up in my hometown of Yucca Valley. And Brett had grown up there, went to Westmont College, moved back home after he'd gotten married, had a couple of kids, took over his dad's construction business in town. They built homes, and they had a small cabinet-making manufacturing shop there. And he was in his late 50s. His kids had grown up, were in college, and I got invited to a going-away party. Now, Brett and I weren't that close. We were friendly. We'd been involved in the community together, but we weren't that close. But close enough, when I got invited to his going-away party, I showed up. So I walk into the room. I see Brett. I said, "So Brett, I understand you're leaving us." And he said, "Yep, I'm leaving." I said, where are you going to? He says, "Chad, I'm moving to America." And I said, "Huh?" He says, "Brett, it's been a long day." He said, "Yep, Chad, I'm moving to America." I said, "All right, Brett, I got you. Where are you going?" He says, "Chad, I just can't take California any longer. Taxes are too high. I'm so sick and tired of having to deal with the government. It seems like everything's overregulated. I got one more move into me. I'm moving to America. I'm moving to McKinney, Texas." And it's interesting because I'd heard those types of stories over and over and over again. People leaving California and wanting to move to Texas, or moving to Idaho, or moving to Nevada, or moving to Arizona. And what dawned on me when I left that party was I thought, Brett's doing a rational thing. And in psychology, there's a term, the fight or flight response. You heard that? When faced with fear, you do one of 2 things. You either stand and fight, or you get scared and you run, you flee. For Brett, for him, he had one move left in him, and he decided, I'm going to flee. I'm out of here. I'm moving to McKinney, Texas. But I think for the rest of us that are here, that have businesses here, that have family that's here, who don't want to flee, who don't want to leave, our only choice is to stay here and fight. And so for me, that's what moves me.
The messages I want to leave you with are very simple, and there are 5 of them. So I think this is what you need to communicate to the members that you speak today. First of all, you need to talk about the fact that our system is in terrible shape. Now, we all know that. You have personal experience with this. There's an opportunity to cite any particular statistics you may know or have on that, but there are 2 issues. It's not just the condition of the roadway, which is bad. It is the congestion that we have to deal with on a daily basis. So the system is not in good shape. Secondly, I think you need to communicate to them that they need to address this issue. We've had health care, the MCO plan, check that box, it's off. We then moved to the minimum wage, they dealt with that, check that issue, it's off. Where is transportation? Now they're talking about, in some halls of the legislature, about going and dealing with affordable housing, an absolutely critical issue for the state. Where is transportation? They need to address the transportation funding issue. I think the third message should be, because many folks might suggest to you this is not a good year, this is an election year, it's always tough to deal with these kinds of issues, particularly when you're talking about revenue increases in an election year. Delay is not an option. And delay is not an option because every day that goes by that we don't have a new revenue source is money that is lost. Not only money to the industry, but money to fixing our system. And when we do finally decide, hopefully, to address this issue, it's going to cost a hell of a lot more because we aren't taking care of it today. So delay is not an option. I think you need to be to recognize and be able to tell the legislators that you support revenues and reforms, because reforms are going to have to be a critical element of this proposal. The money needs to be protected. The money needs to be dedicated. We need to accompany any revenue package with efficiency improvements, and we need to have an accountable program. An accountable program similar to what we did with Proposition 1B. This isn't new stuff. When we had Proposition 1B, the $20 billion bond issue approved by the voters for transportation back in 2006, there were accountability and transparency elements of that proposal that were moved forward. It was well managed by the California Transportation Commission, and it was effectively delivered by both Caltrans and the local agencies or regional agencies that had responsibility for it. Those of you that were engaged in Prop 1B work, I think you will agree, it was a different breed of cat. And we need to have not only a new revenue, but we need to incorporate reforms. And then finally, jobs and the economy. That's what this is all about. And depending on who you want to talk to, for every $1 billion worth of capital investment in transportation, there are 13,000 direct jobs. I believe that's the new number. It's varied up and down from 18,000. I've even heard some people say as many as 33,000. Bottom line, it's a lot of jobs. For all the capital work that we do and the money that is invested, it returns a tremendous amount of good-paying jobs for this state. And it has a very significant impact on our economy. And so, again, just briefly, the system is in bad shape. We need to address the issue now. Delay is not an option. Revenues need to be accompanied by reforms, and jobs and the economy are critical.